Third light. The third light consists of 3 gleams. First gleam. An important aspect of the Qur'an of miraculous expositions as miraculousness was explained in the 13th word. It has been included here so that it might take its place among the other aspects of miraculousness, its brothers. It is as follows. If you want to see and appreciate how, like shining stars, all the Qur'an's verses scatter the darkness of unbelief by spreading the light of miraculousness and guidance, imagine yourself in the age of ignorance and desert of savagery where everything was enveloped in lifeless veils of nature, under the darkness of ignorance and heedlessness. Then suddenly from the elevated tongue of the Qur'an, you hear verses like, "Whatever is in the heavens extols and glorifies God, for He is the mighty, the wise." Qur'an, 57-1, 59-1, 61-1. Whatever is in the heavens and earth extols and glorifies God, the Sovereign, the Most Holy One, the Mighty, the Wise. Qur'an, 62-1. See how those dead or sleeping creatures of the world spring to life at the sound of extols and glorifies in the minds of those listening, how they awake, spring up, and mention God's names. And at the sound of, the 7 heavens and the earth and all within them extol and glorify Him. Qur'an, 1744. The stars in those black skies, each a lifeless piece of fire, and the wretched creatures on the face of the earth present the following view to those listening. The sky appears as a mouth and the stars as wisdom displaying words and truth uttering lights. The earth appears as a head, the land and sea as tongues, and all animals and plants as words of glorification. Otherwise you will not appreciate the subtleties of the pleasure at looking from this time to that. For if you look at each verse as having scattered its light since that time, and having become like universally accepted knowledge with the passage of time, and as shining with the other lights of Islam, and taking its color from the sun of the Qur'an, or if you look at it through a superficial and simple veil of familiarity, you will not truly see what sort of darkness each verse scatters or how sweet is the recital of its miraculousness, and you will not appreciate this sort of its miraculousness among its many sorts. If you want to see one of the highest degrees of the Qur'an of miraculous expositions, miraculousness, listen to the following comparison. Let us imagine an extremely strange and vast and spreading tree which is concealed beneath a veil of the unseen and hidden in a level of concealment. It is clear that there has to be a relationship, harmony, and balance between a tree and all its members like its branches, fruits, leaves, and blossom, the same as between man's members. Each of its parts takes on a form and is given a shape in accordance with the nature of the tree. So if someone appears and traces a picture on top of the veil corresponding to the members of the tree, which has never been seen, then delimits each member, and from the branches to the fruit, and the fruit to the leaves draws a form proportionately, and fills the space between its source and extremities, which are an infinite distance from one another, with drawings showing exactly the shape and form of its members, certainly no doubt will remain that the artist sees the concealed tree with an eye that penetrates and encompasses the unseen, then he depicts it. In just the same way, the discriminating statements of the Qur'an of miraculous exposition concerning the reality of contingent beings, that is, concerning the reality of the tree of creation which stretches from the beginning of the world to the farthest limits of the hereafter, and spreads from the earth to the divine throne and from minute particles to the sun, have preserved the proportion between the members to such a degree and have given each member and fruit a form so suitable that at the depictions of the Qur'an, all exacting scholars have declared at the conclusion of their investigations, "What wonders God has willed! How great are God's blessings!" They have said, "It is only you who solves and unravels the talisman of the universe and riddle of creation. O all-wise Qur'an! And God's is the highest similitude." Qur'an, 16-60. And there is no error in the comparison. Let us represent the divine names and attributes, and dominical acts and deeds as a tuba tree of light, the sphere of whose grandeur stretch from pre-eternity to post-eternity, and the limits of whose vastness spread through infinite, endless space and encompass it, and the limits of whose deeds stretch from, "It is God who splits the seed grain and date stone." Qur'an, 6–95. And, "Come between man and his heart." Qur'an, 8–24. 2. Who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Qur'an, 7–54. And the heavens rolled up in his right hand. Qur'an, 39–67. The all-wise Qur'an has described that luminous reality, the truths of those names and attributes, and acts and deeds, together with all their branches and twigs and aims and fruits, in a way so harmonious, so fitting for one another, so appropriate for one another, without marring one another or spoiling the decree of one another, or their being remote from one another, that all the people of illumination and those who have penetrated to the realities, and all the wise and the sage who have journeyed in the realm of the inner dimension of things, have declared, "Glory be to God," in the face of that discriminating exposition, and have affirmed it, saying, "How right! How conformable with reality, how fine, how worthy!" Take, for example, the 6 pillars of belief, which are like a single branch of those 2 mighty trees which look to the entire sphere of contingency and sphere of necessity. It depicts all the branches and boughs of those pillars as far as the furthest fruits and flowers, observing such a harmony and proportion between them, and describes them in a manner so balanced, and illustrates them a way so symmetrical that the human mind is powerless to perceive it and stands astonished at its beauty. And the proof that a beauty of proportion and perfect relation and complete balance have been preserved between the 5 pillars of Islam, which are like one twig of the branch of belief, down to the finest details, smallest point of conduct, furthest aims, most profound wisdom, and most insignificant fruits, is the perfect order and balance and beauty of proportion and soundness of the greater Sharia of Islam, which has emerged from the decisive statements, senses, indications and allusions of the comprehensive Qur'an. They form an irrefutable and decisive proof and just witness that cannot be doubted. This means that the expositions of the Qur'an cannot be attributed to man's partial knowledge, and particularly to the knowledge of someone unlettered. They rest rather on a comprehensive knowledge and are the word of one who is able to see all things together and observe in one moment all truths between pre-eternity and post-eternity. In this we believe. 2nd Gleam. Since just how far the human philosophy which challenges Quranic wisdom has fallen in the face of that wisdom has been explained and illustrated with comparisons in the 12th word and proved in the other words, we refer readers to those treatises and for now offer a further comparison from another point of view. It is as follows. Human science and philosophy look at the world as fixed and constant. And they discuss the nature of beings and their characteristics in detail. If they do speak of their duties before their Maker, they speak of them briefly. Quite simply, they speak only of the decoration and letters of the Book of the Universe, and attach no importance to its meaning. Whereas the Quran looks at the world as transient, passing, deceptive, traveling, unstable, and undergoing revolution. It speaks briefly of the nature of beings and their superficial and material characteristics, but mentions in detail the worshipful duties with which they are charged by the Maker, and how and in what respects they point to His names, and their obedience before the divine creational commands. We shall therefore look at the differences between human philosophy and Quranic wisdom in regard to this matter of looking at things either briefly or in detail, and shall see which is pure truth and reality. A watch in our hand appears to be constant, but its inside is in perpetual upheaval through the motion of the workings and the constant anguish of the cogwheels and parts. In just the same way, together with its apparent stability, this world, which is a huge clock of divine power, is perpetually revolving within upheaval and change, transience and evanescence. Indeed, since time has entered the world, night and day are like a two-headed hand counting the seconds of that huge clock. The years are like a hand counting its minutes, while the centuries count its hours. Thus, time casts the world onto the waves of death and decline. It assigns all the past and the future to non-existence, leaving in existence only the present. Together with this form which time gives the world, with regard to space also it is like an unstable clock undergoing revolution. For since the space of the atmosphere changes swiftly and quickly passes from one state to another through being filled and emptied with clouds sometimes several times a day, It causes change like a hand counting the seconds. And the space of the earth, which is like the floor of the house of the world, since with life and death and the animals and plants its face changes very rapidly, like a minute hand, it shows that this aspect of the world also is transient. And just as the earth is like this in regard to its face, so through the revolutions and upheavals within it, and the mountains emerging as a result and disappearing, this aspect of the world is slowly passing also, like an hour hand. And through change like the movements of the celestial bodies, the appearance of comets, the occurrence of solar and lunar eclipses, and falling stars, the space of the heavens too, which is like the ceiling of the house of the world, shows that the heavens also are not stable and constant, but are progressing towards old age and destruction. Their change is slow and tardy like the hand counting the days in a weekly clock, but in every respect it demonstrates that it is transient and passing and heading for destruction. Thus, the world, in regard to the world, has been constructed on these 7 pillars. These pillars perpetually shake it. But when the world which is thus in motion and being shaken looks to its Maker, the motion and change is the working of the pen of power writing the missives of the eternally besought One. And those changing states are the mirrors of the divine names, which, being constantly renewed, display with ever-differing depictions the manifestation of the name's qualities. And so, in respect of the world is both transient and hastens towards death, and is undergoing revolution. Although in reality it is departing like flowing water, to the heedless eye it appears to be frozen. Due to the idea of nature, it has become dense and turbid, and become a veil concealing the hereafter. Thus, through philosophical investigation and natural science, and the seductive amusements of dissolute civilization and its intoxicated passions, sick philosophy has both increased the world's frozen state and inaction, and made denser heedlessness, and increased its opaqueness and turbidity, and caused the Maker and the hereafter to be forgotten. Whereas, with its verses, by the Mount of Revelation, by a book inscribed, Qur'an, 52:1, 2, when the event inevitable comes to pass. Qur'an, 56:1, the day of noise and clamor. What is the day of noise and clamor? Qur'an, 101:1. The Qur'an cards the world in regard to the world like cotton, and casts it away. Through its expositions like, do they see nothing in the government of the heavens and the earth? Qur'an, 7:185. Do they not look at the sky above them? How we have made it. Qur'an, 50:6. Do the unbelievers not see that the heavens and the earth were joined together before we clove them asunder? Qur'an, 21:30. It gives the world a transparency and removes its turbidity. Through its light-scattering illuminations like, God is the light of the heavens and the earth. Qur'an, 24:35. What is the life of this world but play and amusement? Qur'an, 6:32. It melts the frozen, inactive world. Through its death-tainted expressions like, when the sun is folded up. Qur'an, 81:1. When the sky is cleft asunder. Qur'an, 82:1. When the sky is rent asunder. Qur'an, 84:1. And the trumpet will be sounded, and all that are in the heavens and all that are on earth will fall down senseless, except such that it pleases God to exempt. Qur'an, 39:68. It smashes the delusion that the world is eternal. Through its thunderous blasts, like, He knows what enters within the earth and what comes forth out of it, what comes down from the skies and what mounts up to them. And He is with you wheresoever you may be. And God sees all that you do. Qur'an, 57:4. And say, Praise be to God, who will show you His signs, so that you shall know them. And your sustainer is not unmindful of all that you do. Qur'an, 27:93. It scatters the heedlessness born of the notion of nature. Thus, from beginning to end the Qur'an's verses which are turned towards the universe proceed according to this principle. They reveal and display the reality of the world as it is. Through showing just how ugly the ugly world is, it turns man's face from it, and points out the beautiful world's beautiful face, which looks to the Maker. It fastens man's eye on that. It instructs in true wisdom and knowledge, teaching the meanings of the book of the universe, and looking infrequently at the letters and decorations. It does not cause the meaning to be forgotten like drunken philosophy, nor make man enamored of the ugly and waste his time on meaningless things due to the decoration of the letters. Third Gleam. In the second Gleam we pointed to the fall of human philosophy before Quranic wisdom and to the miraculousness of Quranic wisdom. Now, in this Gleam, we shall show the degree of the wisdom and science, before Quranic wisdom, of the purified scholars, the saints, and the enlightened among philosophers, the Ishraqiyun, who are all students of the Qur'an, and shall make a brief indication to the Qur'an's miraculousness in this respect. A most true indication of the all-wise Qur'an's sublimity, and a most clear proof of its truth and justice, and a most powerful sign of its miraculousness is this. Preserving all the degrees of all the areas of divine unity together with all their necessities, and expounding them, it has preserved their balance and not spoilt it, and it has preserved the balance of all the exalted divine truths, and it has brought together all the ordinances dictated by the divine names and preserved their mutual proportion, and it has brought together the dominical and divine acts with perfect balance. Thus, this preserving and balance and bringing together is a characteristic which is certainly not present in man's works nor in the products of the thought of the eminent among mankind. It is to be found nowhere in the works of the saints who have penetrated to the inner face of beings, which looks to their Creator, nor in the books of the Ishraqiyun, who have passed to the inward, hidden meaning of things, nor in the knowledge of the spiritual who have penetrated the world of the unseen. As though they have practiced a division of labor, it is as if each group adheres to only one or two branches of the mighty tree of reality. Each busies itself with only its fruit or its leaves. They either know nothing of the others, or else do not concern themselves with them. Absolute reality cannot be comprehended by restricted views. A universal view like the Qur'an is necessary in order to comprehend it. For sure they are instructed by the Qur'an, but with a particular mind they can only see completely one or two sides of universal reality, are preoccupied with them, and imprisoned in them. They spoil the balance of reality through either excess or negligence and mar its proportion and harmony. This truth was explained with an unusual comparison in the second branch of the 24th word, and now we shall point to the matter with another comparison. For example, let us suppose there is some treasure under the sea, full of innumerable jewels of various kinds. Divers are plunging the depths to search for the jewels of the treasure. Since their eyes are closed, they understand what is there through the dexterous use of their hands. A longish diamond comes into the hand of one of them. The diver assumes that the whole treasure consists of a long, pillar-like diamond. When he hears of other jewels from his companions, he imagines that they are subsidiary to the diamond he has found, and are facets and embellishments of it. Into the hand of another passes a round ruby, while another finds a square piece of amber, and so on. Each of them believes that the jewel he sees with his hand is the essential, major part of the treasure, and supposes that the things about which he hears are additional parts and details of it. So then the balance of the truths is spoilt, and the mutual proportion too is marred. The color of many truths changes, and in order to see the true color of reality they are obliged to resort to forced interpretation and elaborate explanations. Sometimes even they go as far as denial and rejection. Anyone who studies the books of the Ishraqiyun philosophers and the works of Sufis who rely on illuminations and visions without weighing them on the scales of the Sunnah will doubtless confirm this statement of ours. That is to say, although their works concern truths similar to those of the Qur'an and are taken from the Qur'an's teachings, because they are not the Qur'an, they are defective in that way. The Qur'an's verses also, which are oceans of truths, are divers for that treasure under the sea. But their eyes are open and encompass the treasure. They see what there is in the treasure and what there is not. They describe and expound it with such harmony, order, and proportion that they show the true beauty and fineness. For example, just as they see the vastness of dominicality expressed by the verses. and the whole of the earth will be but his handful, and the heavens will be rolled up in his hand. Qur'an, 39–67. The day that we roll up the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books completed. Qur'an, 21–104. So too they see the all-encompassing mercy expressed by these. God. There is nothing hidden from him on the earth or in the heavens. He it is who shapes you in the wombs as he pleases. Qur'an, 3–5, 6. There is not a moving creature, but he has grasp of its forelock. Qur'an, 11:56. How many are the creatures that carry not their own sustenance? It is God who feeds, both, them and you. Qur'an, 29–60. And just as they see and point out the vast extent of the creativity expressed by, who created the heavens and the earth and made the darkness and the light. Qur'an, 6–1. So too they see and show the comprehensive disposal and encompassing dominicality expressed by, but God has created you and what you do. Qur'an, 37–96. They see and point out the mighty truth expressed by, he gives life to the earth after its death. Qur'an, 30–50. And the magnanimous truth expressed by, and your sustainer inspired the bee. Qur'an, 16–68. And the sovereign and commanding vast truth expressed by, the sun and the moon and the stars subjugated to his command. Qur'an, 7:54. They see and show the compassionate, regulating truth expressed by, do they not observe the birds above them, spreading their wings and folding them in? None can uphold them except the most merciful, indeed he sees all things. Qur'an, 67–19. And the vast truth expressed by, his throne extends over the heavens and the earth, and he feels no fatigue in preserving them. Qur'an, 2–255. And the guarding truth expressed by, and he is with you wherever you may be. Qur'an, 57–4. And the all-encompassing truth expressed by, he is the first and the last and the outward and the inward, and he is knowing of all things. Qur'an, 57–3. And the proximity expressed by, it was we who created man, and we know what dark suggestions his soul makes to him, for we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. Qur'an, 50–16. And the elevated truth indicated by, the angels ascend to him in a day the measure of which is 50,000 years. Qur'an, 70–4. And the all-embracing truth expressed by, God commands justice, the doing of good, and liberality to kith and kin, and he forbids all shameful deeds, and injustice and rebellion. Qur'an, 16–90. The Qur'an's verses see and show in detail each of the 6 pillars of belief in respect of this world and the hereafter, action and knowledge. They see and show intentionally and seriously each of the 5 pillars of Islam, and all the principles which ensure happiness in this world and the next. They preserve their balance, perpetuate their proportion, and a form of the Qur'an's miraculousness comes into being from the source of the beauty which is born of the mutual proportion of the entirety of those truths. It is due to this great mystery that although the scholars of theology, Kalam are students of the Qur'an and one section of them has written thousands of works of 10 volumes each on the pillars of belief, because like the Mutazilites they preferred the reason to revelation, they have not been able to express with clarity so many as 10 of the Qur'an's verses, or prove them decisively, or convince persuasively concerning them. It is quite simply as though they have dug tunnels under distant mountains, taken pipes with the chains of causes to the ends of the world, there cut the chains, and then demonstrated knowledge of God and the existence of the necessarily existent one, which are like the water of life. The Qur'an's verses, however, can all extract water from every place like the staff of Moses, open up a window from everything, and make known the all-glorious Maker. We have actually proved and demonstrated this fact in the Arabic treatise Qutra, and in the other words, which flow forth from the ocean of the Qur'an. It is also due to this mystery that since all the leaders of the heretical groups who have passed to the inward nature of things Baitan, who, not following the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessing upon him, but relying on their visions, have returned having gone halfway, and becoming leaders of a community have founded sects, have been unable to preserve the proportion and balance of the Quranic truths. They have fallen into innovation and misguidance and driven a community of people down the wrong road. Thus, the complete impotence of all these demonstrates the miraculousness of the Quran's verses. Conclusion. 2 flashes of the Quran's miraculousness mentioned in the 14th drop of the 19th word are its repetitions, which are imagined to be a fault, and its brevity concerning the physical sciences, both of which are sources for flashes of miraculousness. Also, a flash of the Quran's miraculousness which shines on the miracles of the prophets in the Quran is demonstrated clearly in the second station of the 20th word. Similarly to these, numerous flashes of miraculousness have been mentioned in the other words and in my Arabic treatises. Therefore, deeming those to be sufficient, here we shall only say this, that a further miracle of the Quran is that just as all the miracles of the prophets display an impress of the Quran's miraculousness, so with all its miracles, the Quran is itself a miracle of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him. And all the miracles of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, are a miracle of the Quran which demonstrate its relation with Almighty God. And with the appearance of that relation all of its words become miracles. For then a single of its words may contain the meaning of a tree of truths, like a seed, and may be connected with all the members of a mighty truth, like the center of the heart, and since it relies on an all-encompassing knowledge and infinite will, it may look to innumerable things together with their letters, totalities, situations, and positions. It is because of this that the scholars of the science of letters claim that they have found a pageful of secrets in a single of the Quran's letters, and they prove what they claim to adepts of that science. Now, gather together in your mind's eye all the lights, rays, flashes, beams, and gleams from the start of this treatise up to here and consider them all together. As a decisive conclusion, they recite and proclaim in resounding tones the claim made at the beginning, that is, say, if all mankind and the jinn were to gather together to produce the like of this Quran, they could not produce the like thereof, even if they backed up each other with help and support. Quran 17-88. Glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all-knowing, all-wise. Quran 2:32. O our Sustainer! Do not call us to task if we forget or do wrong. Quran 2-286. O my Sustainer! Expand for me my breast, and make easy for me my task, and remove the impediment from my speech, so that they may understand what I say. Quran 20:25-28.
O God! Grant blessings to our Master Muhammad that will be pleasing to you and will be fulfillment to his truth, and to his family, his companions, and his brothers, and grant them peace.
O our Sustainer! Let not our hearts deviate after you have guided us, and grant us mercy from your presence, for you are the granter of bounties without measure. Quran 3-8. And the close of their prayer will be, all praise be to God, the Sustainer of all the worlds. Quran 10:10. Ameen. 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 First addendum. Of the addenda added to the 25th word, this first addendum consists of the 17th degree of the first station of the 7th ray, the supreme sign, on account of its station. Knowing the aim of life in this world, and the life of life, to be belief, the tireless and insatiable traveler through the world who was questioning the universe concerning his Sustainer then said to himself, let us refer to the book called the Quran of Miraculous Exposition, which is known as the word and speech of the one we are seeking, and is the most famous, brilliant, dominant book in the world, challenging everyone in every century who does not submit to it. But first we must prove that it is the book of our Creator. And he started to search. Since the traveler lived at this time, he looked first at the Risale-i Nur, which consists of flashes of the Quran's miraculousness, and saw that its 130 parts are fine points and lights of the verses of that distinguisher between truth and falsehood, and authentic explanations of them. Although through striving and endeavor the Risale-i Nur has spread the Quranic truths everywhere in an age as obstinate and atheistic as this, the fact that no one has opposed it successfully proves that the Quran, which is its master, source, authority, and son, is heavenly and revealed, and not man's word. Only one proof of the Quran out of the hundreds of the Risale-i Nur, the 25th word together with the last part of the 19th letter, has proved so decisively that the Quran is miraculous in 40 aspects that everyone who has seen them, rather than criticizing or objecting to them, has been full of wonder at their proofs, appreciating and praising them. So referring it to the Risale-i Nur to prove the Quran's miraculous aspects and its being the Word of God, the traveller only noted with brief indications several points demonstrating its greatness. First point. Just as with all its miracles and all its truths, which are an indication of its veracity, the Quran is a miracle of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, so too with all his miracles and the evidences of his prophethood and perfections of his knowledge, Muhammad peace and blessings be upon him is a miracle of the Quran, and a decisive proof that it is the Word of God. Second point. The Quran caused a transformation in social life in this world in so luminous, happy, and truthful a fashion, and brought about such a revolution in both men's souls, and hearts, and spirits, and minds, and in their personal lives, social lives, and political lives, and continued and directed that revolution, that every minute for 14 centuries its 6,666 verses have been recited with deep reverence by the tongues of at least 100 million men, and it has trained men, purified their souls and cleansed their hearts, and has caused spirits to unfold and progress, given direction and light to minds, and vitality and happiness to life. For sure, such a book has no like. It is a wonder, a marvel, a miracle. Third point. The eloquence the Quran has demonstrated from that age till now is illustrated by the following. It caused Labid's daughter to remove from the walls of the Kaaba the famous verses written in gold of the most celebrated poets called the Seven Hanging Poems, and to declare while doing so, beside the verses of the Quran these no longer have any value. Also, when a Bedouin poet heard the verse, "Therefore expound openly what you are commanded," Quran, 15–94, being recited, he bowed down in prostration. When asked if he had become a Muslim, he replied, "No, I was prostrating before the eloquence of this verse." Also, thousands of brilliant scholars and learned literary figures like the geniuses of the science of rhetoric, Abdul Qahir Jurjani, Sakaki, and Zamakhshari, all reached the conclusion that the Quran's eloquence is beyond man's power, he could not achieve it. Also, although from that time it has continuously issued a challenge provoking conceited and egotistical orators and poets, proclaiming in a way which will sting their pride, "Produce the like of one single surah or be resigned to ignominy and ruin in this world and the next." The obdurate orators of that time gave up disputing it verbally, the short way of producing the like of one surah, and chose the way of the war, which was lengthy and threw their lives and property into peril, thus proving that it was not possible to take the short way. Also, millions of Arabic books are in circulation, written since that time by the Quran's friends through the desire to resemble and imitate it, and by its enemies, driven to combat and criticize it, and such works are being written and have improved through the meeting of minds and ideas. But if even the most common man should listen to them, he would declare that none of them have reached it, saying, "The Quran does not resemble these and is not of their level. It is either lower than all of them or higher. No one in the world, no unbeliever, nor an idiot even, can say that it is lower, which means that the degree of its eloquence is above all of them." One time, a man recited the verse, "All that is in the heavens and the earth extols and glorifies God." Quran, 57–1, etc. and said, "I can't see the eloquence in this, although it is considered wonderful." So it was said to him, "You return to that time like the traveler, and then listen to it." So imagining himself to be there before the Quran was revealed, he saw the beings of the world to be lifeless, without consciousness and duties, wretched and obscure in an unstable, transitory world in the middle of limitless, empty space. Suddenly, listening to this verse from the tongue of the Qur'an, he saw that it drew back a veil from the universe and face of the world, illuminating it. He saw that this pre-eternal address and eternal decree instructs the conscious beings lined up in the centuries, revealing the universe to be like a huge mosque, and foremost the heavens and the earth, and all beings, to be employed in the glorification and remembrance of God, enthusiastically performing their duties with joy and eagerness. He appreciated the degree of eloquence of this verse, and comparing the others to it, understood one of the thousands of instances of wisdom in the recitation of the Qur'an's eloquence overspreading half the earth and a fifth of mankind, and, being held in utter veneration, perpetuating its sublime sovereignty for 14 centuries without break. Fourth point. The Qur'an displays an agreeableness so true that for those who recite it, its many repetitions, which are the cause of even the sweetest things being wearied of, do not cause weariness, rather for those whose hearts are not corrupted and taste spoilt, the repetitions increase its agreeableness. Since early times this has been accepted by everyone and become proverbial. Furthermore, it demonstrates such a freshness, youth, and originality that although it has lived for 14 centuries and has been freely available to everyone, it has preserved its freshness as though newly revealed. Each century has seen it to be young as though it was addressing that century in particular. And although in order to benefit from it all the time, all the branches of scholars have always had copies of it present with them in large numbers and have followed and emulated its style and manner of expression, it has preserved the originality in its style and manner of exposition exactly. Fifth point. One wing of the Qur'an is in the past, and one is in the future. And just as its root and one wing are the agreed truths of the former prophets, and it confirms and corroborates them, and they too confirm it with the tongue of unanimity, so too all the true Sufi paths and ways of sainthood whose fruits, the saints and purified scholars, who receive life from the Qur'an, show through their vital spiritual progress that their blessed tree is living, effulgent, and the means to truth. They grow and live under the protection of its second wing, and testify that the Qur'an is pure truth and the assembly of truths and in its comprehensiveness, is a matchless wonder. Sixth point. The Qur'an's truthfulness and veracity show that its 6 aspects are luminous. Indeed, the pillars of argument and proof beneath it, the flashes of the stamp of miraculousness above it, the gifts of happiness in this world and the next before it, its goal, the truths of heavenly revelation, its point of support behind it, the assent and evidence of innumerable upright minds to its right, and the true tranquility, sincere attraction, and submission of sound hearts and clean consciences on its left all prove that the Qur'an is a wondrous, firm, unassailable citadel of both the heavens and the earth. Similarly, the universe's disposer, who has made it his practice to foremost always exhibit beauty in the universe, protect good and right, and eliminate impostors and liars, has set his seal on its being sheer truth and right on 6 levels, and not being man's word, and its containing no error, and by giving it the most acceptable, highest, and most dominant place of respect and degree of success in the world, has confirmed and endorsed the Qur'an. So too, the one who is the source of Islam and interpurator of the Qur'an, his believing in it and holding it in greater respect than everyone else, and being in a sleep-like state when it was revealed, and other words and speeches not resembling or coming near it, and that interpurators describing without hesitation and with complete confidence through the Qur'an true cosmic events of generally the past and the future from behind the veil of the unseen, and no trickery or fault being observed in him while being under the gazes of the sharpest eyes, and his believing and affirming every pronouncement of the Qur'an with all his strength and nothing shaking him, is a stamp confirming that the Qur'an is revealed and true and the blessed word of his own compassionate Creator. Also, a fifth of mankind, indeed the greater part of it, being drawn to the Qur'an and bound to it in religion and giving ear to it eagerly desirous of the truth, and according to the testimony of many indications and events and illuminations, the jinn, angels, and spirit beings also gathering around it in truth-worshipping fashion like moths whenever it is recited is a stamp confirming the Qur'an's acceptance by all beings and that it occupies an elevated position. Also, all the classes of mankind from the most stupid and lowly to the cleverest and most learned taking their full share of the Quran's instruction and their understanding its profoundest truths, and all branches of scholars like the great interior puriters of the greater Sharia in particular, and hundreds of Islamic sciences and branches of knowledge, and the brilliant and exacting scholars of theology and the principles of religion extracting from the Quran all the needs and answers for their own sciences. This is a stamp confirming that the Quran is a source of truth and mine of reality. Also, although the Arab literary figures, who were the most advanced in regard to literature, those of them who were not Muslims, had the greatest need to dispute the Quran, they're avoiding producing the like of only a single surah and its eloquence being only one aspect of the 7 major aspects of the Quran's miraculousness, as well as the famous orators and brilliant scholars up to the present who have wanted to gain fame through disputing it being unable to oppose a single aspect of its miraculousness and their remaining silent in impotence. This is a stamp confirming that the Quran is a miracle and beyond the powers of man. Yes, the value, superiority, and eloquence of a speech or word is apparent through knowing from whom it has come and to whom, and for what purpose. The Quran then can have no like, and none can reach it. For the Quran is the speech and address of the sustainer of all the worlds and creator of the whole universe and a dialogue in no way hinting of imitation and artificiality. It is addressed to the one sent in the name of all men, indeed of all beings, the most famous and renowned of mankind, the strength and breadth of whose belief gave rise to mighty Islam and raised its owner to the level of the distance of 2 bow strings and returned him as the addressee of the eternally besought one. It describes and explains the matters concerning happiness in this world and the next, the results of the creation of the universe, and the dominical purposes within it. It expounds also the belief of the one it addresses, which was the highest and most extensive, and bore all the truths of Islam. It turns and shows every side of the huge universe like a map, a clock, or a house, and teaches and describes it in the manner of the craftsmen who made them. To produce the like of this Quran of miraculous exposition is not possible. The degree of its miraculousness cannot be attained to. Also, thousands of precise and learned scholars of high intelligence have all written commentaries expounding the Quran, some of which are of 30, 40, or even 70 volumes, showing and proving through evidence and argument the innumerable qualities, fine points, characteristics, mysteries, elevated meanings, and numerous indications concerning every sort of hidden and unseen matter in the Quran. And the 130 parts of the Risale-i Nur in particular, each of which proves with decisive arguments one quality, one fine point of the Quran, all its parts, such as the miraculousness of the Quran, and the second station of the 20th word, which deduces many things from the Quran concerning the wonders of civilization like the railway and the aeroplane, and the first ray, called Signs of the Quran, which divulges allusions of verses to the Risale-i Nur and electricity, and the 8 short treatises called the 8 Signs, which show how well ordered, full of meaning, and mysterious are the words of the Quran, and the small treatise proving in 5 aspects the miraculousness of the verses at the end of Surah Al-Fath in regard to their giving news of the unseen. Each part of the Risale-i Nur shows one truth, one light of the Quran. All this forms a stamp confirming that the Quran has no like, is a miracle and a marvel, and that it is the tongue of the world of the unseen in the manifest world and the word of one all-knowing of the unseen. Thus, due to these qualities and characteristics of the Quran indicated above in 6 points, 6 aspects, and 6 levels, its sublime, luminous sovereignty and sacred, mighty rule have continued in perfect splendor illuminating the centuries and the face of the earth for 1,300 years. Also, on account of these qualities of the Quran, each of its letters has gained the sacred distinction of yielding at least 10 rewards, 10 merits, and 10 eternal fruits, and the letters of certain verses and surahs yielding 100 or 1,000 fruits, or even more, and at blessed times the light, reward, and value of each letter rising from 10 to hundreds. The traveler through the world understood this and said to his heart, the Quran, which is thus miraculous in every respect, through the consensus of its surahs, the agreement of its verses, the accord of its lights and mysteries, and the concurrence of its fruits and works, so testifies with its evidences in the form of proofs to the existence, unity, attributes, and names of a single necessarily existent one, that it is from its testimony that the endless testimony of all the believers has issued forth. Thus, in brief indication to the instruction in belief and divine unity that the traveler received from the Qur'an, it was said in the 17th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, the one and unique necessary existent, to whose necessary existence in unity points the Qur'an of miraculous exposition, the book accepted and desired by all species of angel, men and jinn, whose verses are read each minute of the year, with the utmost reverence, by hundreds of millions of men, whose sacred sovereignty over the regions of the earth and the universe and the face of time is permanent, whose spiritual and luminous authority has run over half the earth and a fifth of humanity, for more than 14 centuries, with the utmost splendor." Testimony and proof is also given by the unanimity of its sacred and heavenly suras, the agreement of its luminous, divine verses, the congruence of its mysteries and lights, the correspondence of its fruits and effects, by witnessing in clear vision.
The 10th topic of fruits of belief, the 11th ray. A flower of a mirdag. An extremely powerful reply to objections raised against repetition in the Quran. My dear and loyal brothers, due to my wretched situation, this matter is confused and graceless. But I knew definitely that beneath the confused wording was a most valuable sort of miraculousness, though unfortunately I was incapable of expressing it. But however dull the wording, since it concerns the Quran, it is both worship in the form of reflection, and the shell of a sacred, elevated, shining jewel. The diamond in the hand should be looked at, not its torn clothes. Also, I wrote it in 1 or 2 days during Ramadan while extremely ill, wretched, and without food, of necessity very concisely and briefly, and including many truths and numerous proofs in a single sentence. Its deficiencies, then, should be overlooked. Hashia, in English footnote, as the 10th topic of the fruit of Denizli prison, it is a small shining flower of a mirdag and of this month of Ramadan. By explaining one instance of wisdom in the repetitions of the Quran, it dispels the poisonous, putrid illusions of the people of misguidance. My true and loyal brothers, while reading the Quran of miraculous exposition in Ramadan, whichever of the 33 verses I came to that in the first ray described the allusions to the Risale-i, I saw that the page and story of the verse also look to the Risale-i and its students to a degree, in so far as they have a share of the story. Particularly the light verses in Surah Al-Nur, just as they point to the Risale-i with 10 fingers, so the darkness verses following it point directly at those opposing it, these afford a further share. Quite simply, I understood that this station rises from particularity to universality and that one part of that universality is the Risale-i and its students. Indeed, in regard to the breadth, exaltedness, and comprehensiveness that the Quran's address receives from firstly the extensive station of the universal dominicality of the pre-eternal speaker, and from the extensive station of the one addressed in the name of mankind, indeed of all beings, and the most extensive station of all mankind's guidance in all the centuries, and from the station of the most elevated comprehensive expositions of the divine laws concerning the regulation of this world and the hereafter, the heavens and the earth, pre-eternity and post-eternity, and the dominicality of the Creator of the universe, and of all beings, this address displays such an elevated miraculousness and comprehensiveness that both its apparent and simple level, which flatters the simple minds of ordinary people, the most numerous group the Quran addresses, and its highest level, partake of it. It is as though, addressing every age and every class of people, not as one share of the story or one lesson from an historical story, but as parts of a universal principle, it is newly revealed. Particularly its often repeated threats of the wrongdoers, and its severe expositions of calamities visited on the heavens and the earth, in punishment for their wrongdoing, through these and the retribution visited on the Thad and the Mud peoples and on Pharaoh, it draws attention to the unequaled wrongs of this century, and through the salvation of prophets like Abraham, peace be upon him, and Moses, peace be upon him, gives consolation to the oppressed believers. Indeed, all past time and the departed ages and centuries, which in the view of heedlessness and misguidance form a fearsome place of non-existence and a grievous, ruined graveyard, the Qur'an of miraculous exposition shows to every century and class of people in the form of living instructive pages, strange worlds, living and endowed with spirits, and existent realms of the Sustainer which are connected with us. With an elevated miraculousness, it sometimes conveys us to those times, and sometimes brings those times to us. Infusing with life the universe, which in the view of misguidance is lifeless, wretched, dead, and a limitless wasteland revolving amid separation and decline, with the same miraculousness this same Qur'an of mighty stature raises to life those dead beings, makes them converse with one another as officials charged with duties and hasten to the assistance of one another. It instructs mankind, the jinn, and the angels in true, luminous, and pleasurable wisdom. For sure, then, it gains sacred distinctions, like there being 10 merits in each of its letters, and sometimes 100, 1,000, or thousands of merits, and if all men and jinn were to gather together, there being unable to produce the like of it, and it's speaking completely appropriately with all mankind and all beings, and it's all the time being inscribed with eagerness in the hearts of millions of hafizes, and it's not causing weariness through its frequent and numerous repetitions. And despite its many obscure passages and sentences, it's being settled perfectly in the delicate and simple heads of children, and it's being agreeable like Zamzam water in the ears of the sick, the dying, and those distressed by a few words, and it's gaining for its students happiness in this world and the next. Its smoothness of style, which, observing exactly its interpreters being unlettered, allows for no bombast, artificiality, or affectedness, and its descending directly from the heavens, demonstrate a fine miraculousness. So too it shows a fine miraculousness in the grace and guidance of flattering the simple minds of ordinary people, the most numerous of the classes of men, through the condescension in its expression, and mostly opening the clearest and most evident pages like the heavens and earth, and teaching the wondrous miracles of power and meaningful lines of wisdom beneath those commonplace things. By making known that it is also a book of prayer and summons, of invocation and divine unity, which require repetition, it demonstrates a sort of miraculousness through making understood in a single sentence and a single story through its agreeable repetitions numerous different meanings to numerous different classes of people. Similarly, by making known that the most minor and unimportant things in ordinary, commonplace events are within its compassionate view and the sphere of its will and regulation, it demonstrates a sort of miraculousness in attaching importance to even the minor events of the companions of the Prophet in the establishment of Islam and codification of the Sharia, and both in those minor events being universal principles, and, in the establishment of Islam and the Sharia, which are general. They're producing most important fruits, as though they had been seeds. With regard to repetition being necessary due to the repetition of need, the repetition of certain verses which, as answers to numerous repeated questions over a period of 20 years, instruct numerous different levels of people is not a fault. Indeed, to repeat certain sentences so powerful they produce thousands of results and a number of verses resulting from countless evidences, which describe an infinite, awesome, all-embracing revolution that, by destroying utterly the vast universe and changing its shape at doomsday, will remove the world and found the mighty hereafter in its place, and will prove that all particulars and universals from atoms to the stars are in the hand and under the disposal of a single being, and will show the divine wrath and demoniacal anger, on account of the result of the universe's creation, at mankind's wrongdoing, which brings to anger the earth and the heavens and the elements. To repeat such verses is not a fault, but most powerful miraculousness. And most elevated eloquence, an eloquence and lucid style corresponding exactly to the requirements of the subject. For example, as is explained in the 14th flash of the Risale-i, the sentence, "In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate," which forms a single verse and is repeated 114 times in the Qur'an, is a truth that binds the divine throne and the earth, and illuminates the cosmos, and of which everyone is in need all the time. If it was repeated millions of times, there would still be need for it. One needs and longs for it, not only every day like bread, but every moment like air and light. And, for example, the verse, "And verily your sustainer is exalted in might, most compassionate," which is repeated 8 times in Surah Ta, Sin, Mim, Surah 26, Al-Shu'ara. Repeating on account of the result of the universe's creation and in the name of universal dominicality, the salvation of the prophets whose stories are told in the surah, and the punishments of their peoples, in order to teach that dominical dignity requires the torments of those wrongdoing peoples while divine compassion requires the prophet's salvation, is a concise, miraculous, and elevated miraculousness, for which, if repeated thousands of times, there would still be need and longing. And, for example, the verse, "Then which of the favors of your sustainer will you deny?" Qur'an, 55, 13, etc. Which is repeated in Surah Al-Rahman and the verse, "Woe that day to the rejectors of truth," in Surah Al-Mursalat, Surah 77. Shout out threateningly to mankind and the jinn across the centuries and the heavens and the earth, the unbelief, ingratitude, and wrongdoing of those who bring the universe and the heavens and earth to anger, spoil the results of the world's creation, and deny and respond slightingly to the majesty of divine rule, and aggress against the rights of all creatures. If a general lesson thus concerned with thousands of truths and of the strength of thousands of matters is repeated thousands of times, there would still be need for it and its awe-inspiring conciseness and beautiful, miraculous eloquence. And, for example, the repetition of the phrase, "Glory be unto you. There is no God but you, mercy, mercy. Save us, deliver us, preserve us from hellfire." In the supplication of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, called Jawshan al-Kabir, which is a true and authentic supplication of the Qur'an and a sort of summary proceeding from it. Since it contains the greatest truth and the most important of the 3 supreme duties of creatures in the face of dominicality, the glorification and praise of God and declaring Him to be all-holy, and the most awesome question facing mankind, man being saved from eternal misery, and worship, the most necessary result of human impotence, if it is repeated thousands of times, it is still few. Thus, repetition in the Quran looks to principles like these. Sometimes on one page, even, with regard to the requirements of the position and the need for explanation and the demands of eloquence, it expresses the truth of divine unity perhaps 20 times explicitly and by implication. It does not cause boredom, but gives a power to it and inspires an eagerness. It has been explained in the Risale-i with proofs how appropriate, fitting, and acceptable from the point of view of rhetoric are the repetitions in the Quran. The wisdom and meaning of the Meccan and Medinan surahs in the Quran of miraculous exposition being different in regard to eloquence, miraculousness, and detail and brevity is as follows. In Mecca, the first line of those it was addressing and those opposed to it were the Qurayshi idolaters and untaught tribesmen, so a powerful and elevated style in regard to rhetoric was necessary, and a miraculous, convincing, persuasive conciseness, and in order to establish it, repetition was required. Thus, in most of the Meccan surahs, repeating and expressing the pillars of belief and degrees in the affirmation of divine unity with a most powerful, elevated, and miraculous conciseness, it proved so powerfully the first creation and the resurrection, God and the hereafter, not only in a single page, verse, sentence or word, but sometimes in a letter, through grammatical devices like inverting the words or sentences, making a word indefinite, and omissions and inclusions, that the geniuses and leaders of the science of rhetoric met it with wonder. The Risale-i and the 25th word and its addenda in particular, which prove in summary 40 aspects of the Quran's miraculousness, and the Quranic commentary, Risale-i Jaz, from the Arabic Risale-i, which in wondrous fashion proves the aspect of the Quran's miraculousness in its word order, have demonstrated in fact that in the Meccan surahs and verses are the highest styles of eloquence and the most elevated, concise miraculousness. As for the Medinan surahs and verses, since the first line of those they were addressing, who opposed them, were the people of the book, such as the Jews and Christians who affirmed God's existence, what was required by eloquence and guidance and for the discussion to correspond to the situation, was not explanation of the high principles of religion and pillars of belief in a simple, clear, and detailed style, but the explanation of particular matters of the Sharia and its injunctions, which were the cause of dispute, and the origins and causes of secondary matters and general laws. Thus, in the Medinan surahs and verses, through explanations in a detailed, clear, simple style, in the matchless manner of exposition peculiar to the Qur'an, it mostly mentions within those particular secondary matters a powerful and elevated summary, a conclusion and proof, a sentence relating to divine unity, belief, or the hereafter, which makes the particular matter of the Sharia universal and ensures that it conforms to belief in God. It illuminates the passage and elevates it. The Risale-i has proved the qualities and fine points and elevated eloquence in the summaries and conclusions, which express divine unity and the hereafter, and come mostly at the end of verses, like, "Indeed, God is powerful over all things." Quran 2:20. "Verily God has knowledge of all things." Quran 29:62. "And He is the mighty, the wise." Quran 30:27. "And He is exalted in might, most compassionate." Quran 30:5. In explaining in the second beam of the second light of the 25th word, 10 out of the many fine points of those summaries and conclusions, it has proved to the obstinate that they contain a supreme miracle. Yes, in expounding those secondary matters of the Sharia and laws of social life, the Quran at once raises the views of those it addresses to elevated and universal points, and transforming a simple style into an elevated one and instruction in the Sharia to instruction in divine unity, it shows it is both a book of law and commands and wisdom, and a book of the tenets of faith and belief, and of invocation and reflection and summons. And through teaching many of the aims of Quranic guidance in every passage, it displays a brilliant and miraculous eloquence different to that of the Meccan surahs. Sometimes in two words, for example, in sustainer of all the worlds and your sustainer, through the phrase, your sustainer, it expresses divine oneness, and through, sustainer of all the worlds, divine unity. It expresses the divine oneness within divine unity. In a single sentence even it sees and situates a particle in the pupil of an eye, and with the same verse, the same hammer, it situates the sun in the sky, making it an eye to the sky. For example, after the verse, "Who created the heavens and the earth?" Following the verse, "He merges the night into the day, and He merges the day into the night." Quran 35:13. It says, "And He has full knowledge of all that is in men's hearts." Quran 35:38. It says, "Within the vast majesty of the creation of the earth and the skies, He knows and regulates also the thoughts of the heart." And through an exposition of this sort, transforms that simple and unlettered level and particular discussion which takes into account the minds of ordinary people, into an elevated, attractive, and general conversation for the purpose of guidance. A question. Sometimes an important truth is not apparent to a superficial view, and in some positions the connection is not known when an elevated summary concerning divine unity or a universal principle is drawn from a minor and ordinary matter, and it is imagined to be a fault. For example, to mention the extremely elevated principle, "and over all endued with knowledge, one knowing." Quran 12:76. When Joseph, peace be upon him, seized his brother through subterfuge, does not appear to be in keeping with eloquence. What is its meaning and purpose? The answer, in most of the long and middle-length surahs, which are each small Qurans, and in many pages and passages, not only 2 or 3 aims are followed, for by its nature the Quran comprises many books and teachings, such as being a book of invocation, belief, and reflection, and a book of law, wisdom, and guidance. Thus, since it describes the majestic manifestations of divine dominicality and its encompassing all things, as a sort of recitation of the mighty book of the universe, it follows many aims in every discussion and sometimes on a single page, while instructing in knowledge of God, the degrees in divine unity, and the truths of belief. With an apparently weak connection, it opens another subject of instruction in the following passage, joining powerful connections to the weak one. It corresponds perfectly to the discussion and raises the level of eloquence. A second question: what is the purpose of the Quran proving and drawing attention to the hereafter, divine unity, and man's reward and punishment thousands of times, explicitly, implicitly, and elusively, and teaching them in every surah, on every page, and in every discussion? The answer: to instruct in the most important, most significant, and most awesome matters in the sphere of contingency and in the revolutions in the universe's history concerning man's duty, the means to his eternal misery or happiness, man who undertook the divine vicegerency of the earth, and to remove his countless doubts and to smash his violent denials and obduracy, indeed, to make man confirm those awesome revolutions and submit to those most necessary essential matters which are as great as the revolutions. If the Quran draws his attention to them thousands, or even millions of times, it is not excessive, for those discussions in the Quran are read millions of times, and they do not cause boredom, nor does the need cease. For example, since the verse, "For those who believe and do righteous deeds are gardens beneath which rivers flow." Quran 85:11. They will dwell there forever. Quran 5:85, etc. shows the truth of the good news of eternal happiness, which saves from the eternal execution of the reality of death, which every moment shows itself to wretched man, both himself and his world, and all those he loves, and gains for them an everlasting sovereignty. If it is repeated thousands of millions of times and given the importance of the universe, it still is not excessive and does not lose its value. Thus, in teaching the innumerable, invaluable matters of this sort, and endeavoring to persuade, convince, and prove the occurrence of the awesome revolutions which will destroy the present form of the universe and transform it as though it was a house, the Quran of miraculous exposition certainly draws attention to these matters thousands of times explicitly, implicitly, and elusively, and this is not excessive, but renews the bounty which is like an essential need, the same as the essential needs of bread, medicine, air, and light are renewed. And, for example, as is proved decisively in the Risale-i, the wisdom in the Quran repeating severely, angrily, and forcefully, threatening verses like, "For wrongdoers there is a grievous penalty," Quran 14:22. "But for those who reject God, for them will he the fire of hell," Quran 35:36. Is that man's unbelief is such a transgression against the rights of the universe and most creatures that it makes the heavens and earth angry and brings the elements to anger so that they deal blows on those wrongdoers with tempest and storm. According to the clear statement of the verses, "And when they are cast therein, they will hear the terrible drawing in of its breath as it blazes forth almost bursting with fury." Quran 67:7 and 8. Hell so rages at those iniquitous deniers that it almost disintegrates with fury. Thus, through the wisdom of showing, not from the point of view of man's smallness and insignificance before such a general crime and boundless aggression, but the importance of the rights of the monarch of universe's subjects before the greatness of the wrongful crime and the awesomeness of the unjust aggression, and the boundless ugliness in the unbelief and iniquity of those deniers. In accordance with the wisdom of showing this, if repeating in his decree most wrathfully and severely the crime and its punishment, thousands, millions, or even thousands of millions of times, it still would not be excessive and a fault, because for 1,000 years thousands of millions of people have read such verses every day, not with boredom, but with complete eagerness and need. Indeed, every day, all the time, for everyone, one world disappears, and the door of a new world is opened to them. Through repeating "there is no God but God" 1,000 times out of need and with longing in order to illuminate each of those transitory worlds, it makes "there is no God but God" a lamp for each of those changing veils. In the same way, in accordance with the wisdom of appreciating through reading the Quran the penalties of those crimes and the severe threats of the pre-eternal monarch, which smash their obduracy, and of working to be saved from the rebellion of the soul, so as not to obscure in darkness those multiple, fleeting veils and renewed traveling universes, and not to make ugly their images which are reflected in the mirrors of their lives, and not to turn against them those guessed views which may testify in favor of them. The Quran repeats them in most meaningful fashion. Even Satan would shudder at imagining to be out of place these so powerful, severe, and repeated threats of the Quran. It shows that the torments of hell are pure justice for the deniers who do not heed them. And, for example, in repeating many times the stories of Moses, peace be upon him, which contain many instances of wisdom and benefits, like that of the staff of Moses, and of the other prophets, peace be upon them, it demonstrates that the prophethoods of all the other prophets are a proof of the veracity of the prophethood of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, and that one who does not deny all of them cannot in truth deny his messengership. For this purpose, and since everyone does not always have the time or capability to read the whole Quran, it repeats those stories in the same way as the important pillars of belief, in order to make all the long and middle-length surahs each like a small Quran. To repeat them then is not excessive, it is required by eloquence, and teaches that the question of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, is the greatest question of mankind and the most important matter of the universe. It has been demonstrated decisively in the Risale-i with many proofs and indications that through giving the highest position to the person of Muhammad in the Quran and including him in 4 pillars of belief and holding Muhammad is the messenger of God equal to the pillar of there is no God but God, that the messengership of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, is the greatest truth in the universe, and that the person of Muhammad is the most noble of creatures, and his universal collective personality and sacred rank, known as the Muhammadan truth, is the most radiant son of the 2 worlds. His worthiness for this extraordinary position has also been proved. One of these proofs is this. According to the principle of the cause is like the doer, with the equivalent of all the good works performed by all his community at all times entering his book of good works, and the light which he brought illuminating all the truths of the cosmos, and his gratifying not only the jinn, mankind, and animate beings, but also the universe and the heavens and earth, and the supplications of plants, offered through the tongue of disposition, and the supplications of animals offered through the tongue of their innate need, and the righteous of his, peace and blessing be upon him, community every day bequeathing to him their benedictions and supplications for mercy and spiritual gains, whose millions, and together with spirit beings, even millions, of unrejectable supplications are accepted, as we actually witness with our eyes. And since each of the 300,000 letters of the Quran yield from 100 to 1,000 merits, with infinite numbers of lights entering the book of his deeds, only with regard to the recitation of the Quran by all his community, the one all-knowing of the unseen saw and knew that the Muhammadan, peace and blessing be upon him, reality, which is his collective personality, would in the future be like a tuba tree of paradise. It was in accordance with that position that he gave him such supreme importance in the Quran, and in his decree showed the following of him and receiving of his intercession through adhering to his illustrious sunnah to be one of the most important matters concerning man. And from time to time he took into consideration his human personality and human state in his early life, which was a seed of the majestic tuba tree. Thus, since the truths repeated in the Quran are of this value, all sound natures will testify that in its repetitions is a powerful and extensive miracle. Unless, that is to say, a person is afflicted with some sickness of the heart and malady of the conscience due to the plague of materialism, and is included under the rule. Man denied the light of the sun due to disease of the eye. His mouth denied the taste of water due to sickness. 2 additions, which form a conclusion to the 10th topic. The first, 12 years ago I heard that a most fearsome and obdurate atheist had instigated a conspiracy against the Quran, which was to have it translated. He said, the Quran should be translated so that everyone can know just what it is. That is, he hatched a dire plan with the idea of everyone seeing its unnecessary repetitions and its translation being read in its place. However, the irrefutable proofs of the Risale-i proved decisively that a true translation of the Quran is not possible, and other languages cannot preserve the Quran's qualities and fine points in place of the grammatical language of Arabic. Man's trite and partial translations cannot be substituted for the miraculous and comprehensive words of the Quran, every letter of which yields from 10 to 1,000 merits. They may not be read in its place in mosques. Through spreading everywhere, the Risale-i made the fearsome plan come to nothing. I surmise that it was due to the idiotic and lunatic attempts of dissemblers to extinguish the sun of the Quran on account of Satan by puffing at it like silly children, having taken lessons from that atheist, that I was inspired to write this 10th matter while under great constraint and in a most distressing situation. But I do not know the reality of the situation since I have been unable to meet with others. Second edition. After our release from Denizli prison, I was staying on the top floor of the famous Fihir Hotel. The subtle and graceful dancing of the leaves, branches, and trunks of the many poplar trees in the fine gardens opposite me at the touching of the breeze, each with a rapturous and ecstatic motion like a circle of dervishes, pained my heart, sorrowful and melancholy at being parted from my brothers and remaining alone. Suddenly the seasons of autumn and winter came to mind and a heedlessness overcame me. I so pitied those graceful poplars and living creatures swaying with perfect joyousness that my eyes filled with tears. With this reminder of the separations and non-being beneath the ornamented veil of the universe, the grief at a world full of deaths and separations pressed down on me. Then suddenly, the light the Mohammedan, peace and blessing be upon him, truth had brought came to my assistance and transformed my grief and sorrow into joy. Indeed, I am eternally grateful to the Mohammedan being, peace and blessing be upon him, for the assistance and consolation which alleviated my situation at that time, only a single instance of the boundless effulgence of that light for me, like for all believers and everyone. It was like this. By showing those blessed and delicate creatures to be without function or purpose, and their motion to be not out of joy, but as though trembling on the brink of non-existence and separation and tumbling into nothingness, that heedless view so touched the feelings in me of desire for permanence, love of good things, and compassion for fellow creatures and life that it transformed the world into a sort of hell and my mind into an instrument of torture. Then, just at that point, the light Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had brought as a gift for mankind raised the veil. It showed in place of extinction, non-being, nothingness, purposeless, futility, and separations, meanings and instances of wisdom to the number of the leaves of the poplars, and as is proved in the Risale-i, results and duties which may be divided into three sorts. The first sort looks to the all-glorious Maker's names. For example, if a master craftsman makes a wondrous machine, everyone applauds him, saying, "What wonders God has willed! Blessed be God!" Similarly, the machine congratulates the craftsman through the tongue of its disposition, through displaying perfectly the results intended from it. All living beings and all things are machines such as that, they applaud their craftsmen through their glorifications. The second sort of the instances of wisdom looks to the views of living creatures and conscious beings. Beings each become an agreeable object of study, a book of knowledge. They leave their meanings in the sphere of existence in the minds of conscious beings and their forms in their memories, and on the tablets in the world of similitudes, and in the notebooks of the world of the unseen, then they depart from the manifest world and withdraw to the world of the unseen. That is, they leave behind an apparent existence, but gain many existences pertaining to meaning, the unseen, and knowledge. Yes, since God exists and his knowledge encompasses everything, in the view of reality, in the world of believers there is surely no non-being, extinction, nothingness, annihilation, and transitoriness, while the world of unbelievers is full of non-existence, separation, nothingness, and transience. This is taught by the saying, which is on everyone's lips, for those for whom God exists, everything exists, and for those for whom he does not exist, nothing exists, for them there is nothing. In short, just as belief saves man from eternal annihilation at the time of death, so it saves everyone's private world from the darknesses of annihilation and nothingness. Whereas unbelief, and especially if it is absolute unbelief, both sends man and his private world to non-existence with death, and casts him into infernal darknesses. It transforms the pleasures of life into bitter poisons. Let the ears ring of those who prefer the life of this world to that of the hereafter. Let them come and find a solution for this, or else let them embrace belief and be saved from these dreadful losses. Glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all-knowing, all-wise. Qur'an 2:32. From your brother who is in much need of your prayers and misses you greatly. Saeed Nursi.
You can subscribe to our channel by clicking on the profile picture.